Someone is in your house. You can't see them. You can't hear them, but you can feel them. You check the rooms. Nothing. You go back to bed. The feeling doesn't leave. You've probably had a night like that. Most people have. And here's what's strange. So did people 60,000 years ago. So did people 3,500 years ago. So did people in every civilization that has ever existed, on every continent, in every language, in every era of human history. No other belief is this universal. Not a single one. So where did it come from? When did humans first decide that the dead don't fully disappear? And why, after everything science has explained, do most people on Earth still believe in ghosts today? The answer starts not with a ghost story, but with a grave. In 1951, archaeologist Ralph Selecki began excavating a cave in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq called Shanidar Cave. Over the following decade, he found something no one expected: 10 Neanderthal skeletons, not scattered randomly, deliberately placed, positioned carefully, buried. And in one grave, something even stranger: pollen. Dense clusters of pollen from 8 different species of flowering plants: blue hyacinth, yellow groundsel, plants that don't grow inside caves. Someone carried them in. Someone placed them around the body before it was covered over. This was 60,000 years ago. These weren't modern humans. These were Neanderthals, a species we long assumed was too primitive for ritual, too simple for ceremony, too basic for the idea that death required anything more than disposal. The flowers said otherwise. Now, some researchers have questioned whether the pollen was placed intentionally or carried in by burrowing rodents. The debate isn't fully settled. But what is settled is the burial itself. The body was laid in a carved depression in the cave floor. It was positioned deliberately. It was placed. Not dumped, not abandoned, placed. And that distinction matters enormously, because it implies a question. Where did the person go? That question is the beginning of every ghost story ever told. British Museum curator Irving Finkel, one of the world's leading experts on ancient Mesopotamia, argues that the moment humans started burying the dead with objects, they answered that question, whether they meant to or not. If you bury a man with his tools, you believe he will need his tools. If you bury a woman with her jewelry, you believe she will go somewhere she can wear it. The object in the grave is proof of the belief. Something survived. Something traveled. Something is still out there. The earliest confirmed grave goods, items intentionally buried alongside the dead, appear at sites dating back at least 100,000 years. By 30,000 years ago, burials across Europe and Asia routinely included food, weapons, ornaments, and in some cases, red ochre pigment painted directly onto the bones. Not for decoration, as a ritual, as a statement. The dead were being prepared for somewhere. Now let's talk about the oldest ghost drawing ever found, because it exists and it's sitting in the British Museum right now. It's a clay tablet, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, made in Babylon around 1500 BCE. For most of the time the museum has owned it, since the 19th century, it was stored and overlooked. No one examined it properly. The surface looked blank. Then Dr. Finkel held it under a lamp and tilted it to the light, and the image appeared. A bearded male figure, hands tied, being led forward by a woman toward the underworld. The ghost and his guide, drawn in fine lines, barely visible to the naked eye. The tablet is an exorcist's manual, a professional guide to getting rid of unwanted spirits. It describes the problem, a ghost who won't leave. It diagnoses the cause, the ghost is lonely, it never found a companion in life. And it prescribes the cure. Create figurines of a man and a woman, prepare 2 vessels of beer, recite specific words at sunrise invoking the god Shamash, then transfer the ghost into the figurine and send it to the underworld. The final instruction, written in cuneiform clay 3,500 years ago, is 4 words. Do not look behind you. This wasn't folklore, it wasn't poetry, it was a professional document, the way a doctor writes a prescription. Because in ancient Babylon, ghost removal was a profession. There were trained exorcists, there were standard procedures, there were libraries of ghost-related texts in temple archives. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians didn't wonder whether ghosts existed. That was settled. What they needed was practical help dealing with them. But here's the question worth asking. Why? Why across every culture and every era do humans arrive at the same conclusion? Why do we always end up believing that the dead linger? The answer, according to cognitive scientists, is that we were built this way. Your brain evolved under conditions where the cost of missing a threat was death. A shadow that might be a predator, a sound that might be an enemy, a shape at the tree line that might be watching you. If you assumed it was nothing and you were wrong, you were dead. If you assumed it was something and you were wrong, you wasted a few seconds of fear. So the brain evolved to always guess something is there. Psychologists call this hyperactive agent detection. We are wired at a deep biological level to perceive intention and presence behind things that have none. Wind through grass feels watched. An empty house at night feels occupied. A door that swings on its hinge feels deliberate. This didn't cause problems for 300,000 years. It kept us alive. But it also made ghosts inevitable. Because once the people you knew and loved died, your brain didn't stop detecting them. It kept expecting them, kept sensing them in familiar places, kept hearing them in familiar sounds. The mind that evolved to never miss a presence couldn't accept that the most familiar presence of all had simply stopped. Grief, scientists now believe, is partly what ghosts are made of. And so every civilization built a system around them. The ancient Egyptians believed the soul had multiple parts, and if any were disturbed by improper burial, the dead would return. The Greeks wrote detailed instructions for the journey across the river Styx and buried gold tablets with the dead that described literally which way to turn in the underworld. Chinese ancestor veneration held that the spirits of the dead remained connected to the living and required regular offerings of food and paper goods burned in their honor. In ancient Mesopotamia, a ghost who hadn't been properly mourned or buried became dangerous. It wandered, it haunted, it made the living sick, sleepless, confused, unlucky. The cure was always the same. Give the dead what they need. Mourn them properly. Feed them. Speak their name. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Across cultures that had never met, that shared no language, no trade routes, no common mythology, humans arrived at the same answer. The dead need something from us. And if we don't give it, they come back. Today, surveys consistently show that around half of all adults in the modern world believe in ghosts. In countries as different as the United States, South Korea, and Iceland, the numbers are remarkably similar. Half. Despite everything we know about biology, about brain chemistry, about what happens to a body after death. You might find that embarrassing to admit about our species, or you might find it something else entirely. Because here's another way to see it. For 60,000 years, maybe longer, humans have refused to accept that the people they loved simply end. Every civilization that has ever existed has built rituals around that refusal, has decorated the graves, has spoken the names, has left the food, lit the fire, said the prayer, not because they could prove anything, because they couldn't bear not to. The ghost story isn't a sign of a primitive mind, it's a sign of a human one. We are the only species on Earth that buries its dead, mourns its dead, and then wonders, in the quiet hours of the night, whether they are really gone. And 60,000 years later, we still don't have an answer that satisfies us.